What is it that you're most focused in on and zeroed in on this earnings period?
Well, you know what's interesting? When I reflect back on, it's been such a busy year, so much news. But one of the things that I think has been maybe appreciated by the market, but not appreciated as much by the commentators, is what a reinforcing narrative we've seen around AI. So of course, we're focused on tariffs, we're focused on everything that's happening at the Fed. But if we roll the clock back to the start of the year and all the questions that were surfacing around DeepSeek, let alone concerns around where AI demand is, what we've really seen as the year has progressed is that CapEx continuing, and then also these nascent signs of AI demand and AI implementation, which has been such a boon for the hyperscalers in particular. So I think watching that AI narrative continue is especially important in this earnings season.
Team in New York, let's bring back the calendar. I just want to make one point on Nvidia, because Nvidia comes so late in the season.
Right.
But what I reflect on is that when Nvidia hit $4 trillion of market cap, all of the research I was reading was about how the data in the 90 days prior to that had basically shown that Nvidia's most important customers had that commitment that you just outlined on capital expenditures. Take that forward into this next period and bear with me. Is it just as simple as you need to see Alphabet, Microsoft, Meta continue to say we're committed to this for Nvidia then to have a great print when it comes around?
Well, I think that's the first derivative. You do want to see the customers showing that commitment, kind of reinforcing what they've suggested in terms of CapEx estimates, which are very tremendous, as we've seen. But then also that second derivative, which is what I think of as that AI implementation, both within the tech sector, but then for the economy overall. And I think as you start to see that second derivative, that demand come through, I think that is reinforcement for the picks and shovels for the Nvidias of the world.
The wild card is tariffs.
Wild card is
how are the analysts on your desks kind of thinking about that and modeling for that right now?
Well, it's so interesting because if we're taking a look just at price performance since that bottom on April 8th, if you're looking at IT, in particular, it's a 45% run. There has been this massive enthusiasm where the market is beginning to appreciate what's happening with AI and maybe a sigh of relief in terms of the resilience of the economy. But I think when we're taking a look at tariffs, we haven't really seen the full force of those costs come into effect. And so, of course, we want to see what happens with corporate earnings in Q2. But as I think about longer term and kind of this rollback of globalization, I guess my thought is, longer term, what does this mean for corporate profitability? And, there's revenue that the government is collecting that's coming from corporations. And so what that looks like, that is kind of the wild card in terms of how that weighs on Q2, but longer term, what that means for earnings.
Marta, I really appreciated you going back to reference that kind of DeepSeek moment in April where, long story short, markets were roiled by the performance of DeepSeek's model and the cost of it getting there. But one of the things that happened was there was a kind of a valuation reset on the Mag 7. Have they climbed back to a level where you're still like, or is there some interest to look at the Mag 7 in a portfolio right now?
Well, that's what jumps out to me. So when we're taking a look at valuations, what we really want to focus on is the extremes. So, for example, technology, if we're looking at its valuations, price to forward earnings over kind of a history for that particular sector, it is in those extremes. It's in those 9th, 10th deciles. But when we're looking at the Mag 7, we don't see that same, I guess, extreme valuation picture. So I think it's really that 1-2 punch that we saw for the Mag 7, first getting hit by the DeepSeek questions, then getting hit on the tariffs, that have made those companies a little bit more approachable in valuation. And when you think about the health of these companies, kind of their ties to AI and their general kind of strength within the overall economy, it's hard not to consider the Mag 7 a bit of an opportunity, at least offering a bit more margin of safety than some of the other tech-related names.
Marta, I'm going to go to a question I've not had the opportunity to ask for many months now.
Oh, good.
Which is how are you using AI in each of your sort of daily tasks at work, seriously, and which tools do you rely on?
Well, it's a good question. I am a slow adapter, so I'm definitely representing more the tail or more the average of the investment community. And I do, I'll use ChatGPT on the regular just to get a quick summary view of what things look like. Hey, give me the lay of the land in this, give me the lay of the land in that. And we're increasingly beginning to think about what we can do to automate tasks, especially that spreadsheet build, those deeper analytical efforts. What can we do to make that faster so that we can get the heart of the questions sooner and spend more time on the analysis? So I'm really thrilled about it, despite the fact that I'm a late adapter in most things. I think this is something that is really opening up the bandwidth to explore the more interesting stuff of my job.
I really appreciate the answer, because like a lot of our audience are facing the same questions with themselves. Something we reported earlier in the program is that JP Morgan, basically the biggest research shop right on the street, is expanding its research coverage to private companies, and they're starting with OpenAI. What I wanted to ask you about that was almost as like a private proxy, when you think about your own portfolio management, would you read research of those private companies to kind of think about the exposure your public companies have to that name OpenAI, or just to inform like future investment opportunity?
I think that convergence of public-private is really important for the investment community. I think it's really tempting to say, on the private equity side, are we looking at a market peak, or, getting tactical with it? But the reality is that so much of the U.S. market is actually private at this point. And so for us to really understand the dynamics of the public market, we have to have better understanding of the private market. And getting those, those bits of information, it's kind of an inefficient market at this point. So the more that we can dig in, the more systems that we can build, the more landscape that we can view, combining the public and the private, I think that will inform our analysis all the better.